Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Dr. Janice Gassam Asare, founder of BWG Business Solutions, host of the Dirty Diversity podcast, and a PhD-trained organizational psychologist. Janice is also a senior contributing writer for Forbes and the author of several books on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and bias in the workplace, including her latest that I know we're going to talk about today, Rise and Resist. So, Janice, welcome back to Say Hi to the Future.
Hi, Ken. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
So, you work at the intersection of psychology, culture, and power in organizations. What does that mean?
So I look at how technology is being used within organizations, not just how it's being used, but maybe the groups that are getting left behind through its usage, and how bias is replicated in different ways in the workplace and how workplaces can resist bias. So what we're seeing now is like a lot of companies are using AI to help them screen resumes and even figure out like who is performing well. And the same biases that we're seeing just in the world are being replicated in the technology that we use. So I try to figure those types of things out and then understand how we can make sure if we are using the technology, we're using it in a way that doesn't cause harm to any communities.
You know, it's interesting, when you talk about that in AI and bias, because I mean, AI is only as good as the information that's put in or the people that prompt it. And it's social, it's cultural, but it's also people on the technical fringes, if you will. Like there are certain things I did for fun, like applying for roles that where I've actually consulted to these organizations, and I get this thing back in like 5 minutes saying you just don't align. It really does put individuals into a box. Mm-hmm. And I find that really problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's actively a lawsuit with one of the HR companies, where it's a class action lawsuit where people complained about that. They said, we apply and then we receive a response on like a Saturday at 4 a.m. from a recruiter, basically saying, we didn't get the job, which is obviously AI, but they found that the system was doing that and filtering out the resumes of people that AI thought were Black, AI thought were older candidates. And then there was another factor that was being filtered out. And so these systems are looking through our resumes and they're supposed to be only looking for job related things. But if they see things that maybe indicate that you're a woman or indicate that you are a person of a particular background, we're seeing that people's resumes are being filtered out and they're not even being given a chance to interview. So there's a lot of, and it's tough because the technology is emerging so quickly and faster than the legislation can actually regulate it. So I just am very as somebody that's pro technology, I'm very cautious about it too, because I kind of see how I see the dark sides and I see the way that it's going. And I just think we should really be thinking thoroughly about whether it's actually helping us in the workplace. I know with speed and convenience, it helps, especially if you are a recruiter at a large company that receives thousands or tens of thousands of applications. You need some sort of system to go through it, but also thinking about what we're losing when we adopt these systems for convenience, right? Like what we're losing out on and whether there are alternatives that allow us the convenience, but also resist the bias.
So, excuse my ignorance, but how does that even happen when you're saying filter for, color or sex or background and whatnot? How does that actually happen?
Yeah. So if you have on your resume that, for example, you were part of the Hispanic Society for Engineers, if you have that on your resume, AI can read that and knows, okay, if you were part of that community, or if you went to a historically Black college or university, or if you, AI can see your experience and can see, okay, you went to school in, let's say, 1985. So if you were in school or in college in 1985, that would make you, so AI can read all of that information on your resume and makes decisions about us, not only based on, our job experience, but looks at all of those factors and can unintentionally or intentionally filter people out because of that.
So when you say it can be unintentional, I mean, not to be sinister about it, but unless somebody says, look for somebody who's been part of a Hispanic, whatever, college group or whatnot, how else does it get in there? I mean, how else is the whole notion of, we should be screening out for people who are Black or Hispanic actually get in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And AI just reflects so many AI researchers have said this, but AI is just reflecting what the biases we have and those who program it have. And so when you're programming a system, the programmers aren't specifically saying filter out a candidate who is X, but it might say prioritize candidates who went to these universities. And it might just happen that there's a lot of homogeneity around the people who went to those universities. Or it might say prioritize this type of experience, right? Where somebody played a sport, like let me just say lacrosse, that might be coded as leadership experience, or if they were the captain of their lacrosse team. Well, when you look at the racial dynamics of people who play lacrosse, for example, there aren't a lot of Black people that play lacrosse. So it's very insidious, because it's not just, hey, we want to filter these people out, but it's like we prioritize this. But it just so happens that this means that you're filtering out older applicants, or you're filtering out applicants of a certain demographic or racial background. And so it's really, really like deeply embedded into the systems that are being used. So that's what makes them so hard, because we do need to use these systems for convenience. But how do we make the systems better, and how do we make it so that bias isn't like embedded into the programs and systems that we use in order to find candidates?
Yeah, and as leaders, I mean, I really pick up on that. I mean, for me, my whole work around human ingenuity and say out of the future is about diversity, and it's actually not diversity in the way that people normally think about it. We started. It was almost like one of those music shows where you don't see the singer. It was just get a whole bunch of people who we believe are doing things different or cool or whatever. No names, no whatevers. Read the stories. And then we started reaching out to them. And it's funny, because to me, and we have like now in, traditional diversity kind of descriptions or definitions. It's unbelievable how many different countries, colors, backgrounds, religions that we have. So for me, as a leader, I just want that in my thinking around me.
Yeah. And there's so much research that indicates that just workplaces where there are people who come from different backgrounds, the workplaces are more innovative. People are able to stretch themselves and to think more deeply. And the companies are more competitive, because you're able to think about things that maybe me, because of my experience, I don't see. But if I'm working with somebody on my team who's in a different age group as me, or who's in a different country as me, I'm seeing things from a different perspective, right? There's just, from a logical standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense why companies wouldn't prioritize this, because they care about their bottom line. And having a company where there's people of different backgrounds helps your bottom line, right? But it's just not something that is always prioritized.
And here you are today talking to an older Canadian. And you know what? We're 47 minutes in the air away from, where you are in the US, and we are quite different.
Oh, it's only 47 minutes?
To LaGuardia in the air. Absolutely. It's about 3 hours at LaGuardia waiting to get a gate, but
Yeah. I've only driven to years ago. I went to Toronto, but it was like a bus. I don't think I took a bus trip to Toronto, probably like 12 years ago now. And I keep saying I'm going to go back.
it's worth it. Anyway, so Janice, you've written, you've had over 400 articles published. You're a LinkedIn top voice. Again, the host of Dirty Diversity podcast. How do you see writing and thought leadership shaping the public understanding of DEI today?
I think writing is like one of the last frontiers because I feel like people are getting really overwhelmed with social media. I've been seeing a lot of things that people want to get off social media. It's just an influx of so much, but I don't think people have stopped reading. And so I think writing is a powerful way to help people understand things, to educate them, to shape their perceptions. So I think writing and especially journalism is so important right now, especially, I mean, you see what's happening in the US, and everything that's rapidly shifting and changing. Writing to me is a really powerful way to just reflect the times that we're living in.
And it's funny. I mean, and as I've said before, we really remain apolitical on Say Hi to the Future, but it seems there's an opportunity today because there are a lot of companies in the US that are still building, coming around DEI. And I think that in my mind, at least, that's going to provide them a competitive advantage over the next few years of finding the absolute best people for the jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the pendulum, I keep hearing a lot of folks in the DEI space saying that the pendulum is going to swing back. And, we saw last year in 2025, there was a lot of, not only in the US, but outside of the US, a lot of anti-DEI sentiments, people rolling back any sorts of like civil rights and justice and workplace protections. And I do feel like we're going to see things swing back the other way because the fact of the matter is, if you have a company or you have people in a country who have different backgrounds, you need to have policies and legislation in place to make sure that they feel protected and that they feel safe. And that's just the fact of the matter. We don't live in a homogenous Canada or the US or a lot of the countries people may be listening from. These aren't completely homogenous countries. So people of differences need to figure out ways to live cohesively and work cohesively together. So I just think that it's a necessity, no matter how we package it or what we call it. It's something that we're always going to need.
Well, I think so too. I hope so. And I just find, I'm not the first one to say it recently, but we've just forgotten how to hold two thoughts in our head at the same time and even opposing thoughts and how they can both be true. And I don't think it's just a DEI thing. It's just, and I don't think it's a North America thing, but it to me, I've always liked the, of the Venn diagram. And when I work with companies, our teams, and it can be on anything. I mean, every strategic issue, we always walk into a room and there's two sides of thinking. Doesn't have to be around diversity. It's just around, even why we're in the room. And looking for those points of intersection where those two circles overlap, I think that's just critical. It's a critical skill to reclaim today.
Yeah, I think what you said is really true. People just aren't able to hold two truths in their head at the same time and understand that, two things can be true. It's just we're very sort of myopic in our thinking. And we're very sort of like, it can either be this way or that way. And I think that harms us in a lot of ways because we don't give people the space to be dynamic. Everything is sort of like black and white, literally and, figuratively. They're very like black and white. And so I do agree with you 100% on that. And, I'm very hopeful. I think that regardless of the challenges that any company or country is going through, I do think that there are ways that those challenges can be overcome. In some instances, and I know people might think that this is really extreme, but I think some institutions have to be completely rebuilt from the ground up, while other institutions and companies and organizations, there is the ability for them to be reformed and changed. And I think leadership and all of that being, getting new leadership, I think can transform some companies and some, organizations. But I think others, because of the history, because of the, it just, I think some things have to sort of be started over and from the ground up, completely rebuilt. But I do think I'm just hopeful. I think that people want to see change in a positive direction, and any sort of opposition to DEI work or any sort of opposition to equity work that is being seen, I think is outnumbered by the amount of people that do want to see transformation and change.
So through your consulting work, how would you work with a company if the leader said to you, we've got some inherent biases. You've been around a lot longer than I have. The company is decades and decades old, but I want it to stop here. I want to rethink or rebuild.
Yeah, I would really want to speak with the employees, because I think when there is any sort of issues with inequity, and every company has them, no company is perfect, but I really want to speak to the ones who are experiencing the disparities or the inequities, and what are your specific experiences. So oftentimes I have conversations with affinity groups and employee resource groups and more junior level employees to understand their experiences. Because leadership, often what I find is that there's one perception that things are one way. And then when I speak with employees, they're like, no, that doesn't actually reflect reality. So having conversations with employees to understand, like, what are the real issues that you deal with on a regular basis would help me to understand. Is it with some companies, I see it's pay inequities, but what I see more so is a lot of times when I speak with employees, they're like, I don't feel like I have opportunities to grow. I don't have the tools to grow. There isn't a clear pathway. One of the companies I was consulting for, when I was working with their employee resource group, the thing that kept coming up was employees saying they had just gone through a merger, and they said, we don't have clear pathways to advance. We don't even know, if we didn't get our raise, if we have a performance review and we don't get our raise, we don't have clarity around why we didn't get our raise, what we needed to do to get a raise, what we need to do to move to the next position. And we don't feel like we had the tools to succeed. So figuring out and uncovering what the employees are saying is a big first step in figuring out what to do next. But usually, just in my experiences, it's one of a few issues. It's people don't feel like their voices are heard, or people feel like harm is taking place in the workplace and nothing is being done about it. Usually pay alone isn't enough to make somebody leave a job, right? Mm-hmm. I think, I remember, in my schooling learning about, these, and I'm forgetting there's a specific, motivational theory, and I'm forgetting, but there's hygiene factors. So there's factors that are more surface level that are nice to haves. And then there's things that actually make people stay. And pay is not often something that in and of itself would cause somebody to leave a job or make somebody stay at a job. Usually it's the people that you work with, right? Because if you work with really, really great people, even if the pay is crappy, you enjoy waking up and going to your job. But if the pay is amazing, you're getting paid millions and millions of dollars, but you can't stand the people that you work with, they don't value and they don't respect you, you're not going to stay there. And so I think that an important first step is just talking to the employees most impacted and seeing what are their experiences and what are the ways that these issues are baked into the system. Because usually it's not just one person. It's like a systemic issue that employees are experiencing. And so getting to the root of the issue is important.
Speaking with Dr. Janice Gassam Asare today. And Janice, Rise and Resist, How to Reclaim Workplace Equity and Justice. That is your new book. When is it out? Because it's still sheet on
February 24th. So
February 24th.
yes, in a few weeks it'll be out.
What led to this? I mean, I think the last time we spoke on the podcast, the last book was Decentering Whiteness, I believe. So what's happened between the two books? What led to this? And what do I look forward to reading?
Yeah. So, last year, January 2025, I knew that, with the way that things were going in the US, the way that the 2024 election went, I knew that there would be a lot of rollbacks of DEI. And as somebody who works in the DEI space, I wanted to create a guidebook for people who are working in the space, who wanted to figure out, like, how can we continue and keep this work going, even with the rollbacks and the potential opposition. And so on January 20th, 2025, I came out with this playbook. It was called the DEI Resistance Playbook. And it basically talked about the causes of the root causes of the DEI resistance and how you as a change maker in the workplace can push back and make sure you are able to push the work forward. And my editor, the senior editor that I had worked with on the book Decentering Whiteness in the Workplace, he subscribes to my emails, and he saw that email and he's like, this is absolutely perfect for this moment right now that we are living in. And he's like, we should explore how to turn this into a book. So I was like, oh, I never really thought about that, and then I started thinking about, like, if you're somebody who feels very sad or overwhelmed or defeated about what you're seeing happen in the US, and if you feel like somebody whose rights are being taken away, what can you do, right? Because that's something that people are asking, like, what can we do? What does resistance look like? And I'm not somebody who likes history. My husband is somebody who's a big history buff, and he always says, whatever's happening right now is cyclical. We've already seen this happen.
Right.
Nothing new under the sun. So what you see happening here in the US has happened in this place and that place. And so I started looking more into history, and I wanted to figure out what resistance has looked like for people who lived before us. And that's how the idea of the book came about. Because in the book, I specifically look at global resistance from the Black perspective. So all of the people who have resisted in the last hundreds of years and what they did to resist, right? And so I have one of the chapters is called Documenting as Resistance, and how we can document what's happening and what's taking place as a form of resistance to kind of keep that time capsule and make sure that people are able to know and read about what has happened in the future. People seeing, okay, in 2025, these are all of the things that have happened in the country. And so I really just wrote the book as a way for anyone who's trying to create change in an environment where it feels like there's a lot of opposition. How can you use the tools that people who have came before us have used? And what does that look like in present day? So earlier in the podcast, we were talking about we were talking about technology. And so I have a chapter called Technology as Resistance. And I talk about how technology is being used by different people in different ways to resist, right? And so just using the lessons that people used 30, 40, 100, 200 years ago, applying them to present day, and then also like figuring out what are the small micro ways that we can use these lessons to resist. So that's really how the book came about.
Well, I love that story. I mean, it's to have people around us who listen and understand where we're coming from, because as you said, I mean, you probably have so many good ideas or statements or profound insights, but you don't always recognize them in the moment. So it's wonderful that you had a senior editor to do just that for you. And I also love the historical documentation. I'll side with your husband here. I really do though. And companies look for that now too. Have we done this before? Even in launching a product and building in a new country, we just repeat our own mistakes. And you can't take the past as an absolute indicator of what tomorrow will be, but you can't forget it either.
Yeah, 100%. And I think because I'm somebody, history was my least favorite subject. I just found it to be very boring. But I've been seeing a lot of people saying, especially people who are really into like astrology, people have been saying that what's happening with the stars and the planets right now is similar to what was happening when the French Revolution took place. And so a lot of astrologers have been saying that 2026 is a very pivotal year because of all of the things that are happening astrologically. And I'm not somebody who, I would just sleep through those parts of history class where we were talking about the Civil War and the French Revolution. I just didn't find them to be interesting. But now as an adult, years and years and decades later, I'm like, oh, these are actually really important to go back and read and learn and understand, because what's happening now is not something new. And so what I felt was that like a lot of people who are in the DEI space or do any sort of social justice work, I read all of the books that they come out with, and there's so many frameworks and so many like theories of like, this is how you solve the workplace equity issue. And I think instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, all we need to do is go back and look at what those who came before us did, because the people who lived hundreds of years ago didn't have all the tools at their disposal that we have. And so I do think that though things can feel very overwhelming, if you turn on the news, you see what's happening in the US, in Canada, in this place, in that place, it feels very overwhelming. But then it's like, wait, there are people who lived through worse than what we're going through, did not have TV or social media to see what was happening, and still found really powerful ways to resist.
Right.
So what can we do right now that looks at and takes from what they've already done and they've already laid out for us as far as resistance? And so I think that it's powerful for us to look to the past in this moment. And I'm not somebody who really did that a lot, but now I'm somebody who's reading more and learning more about the history, and I think it's really inspiring to see what people endured, how they pushed through different moments, and how we can use that same sort of like endurance to get through this moment.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think though that what we've got to layer on is almost a negativity of technology, because it's almost, when you talk about watching the news, I don't actually think there is any news anymore. I mean, to me, news was, I don't know, there was a hurricane that hit at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It was pretty finite. I don't think there's any opinion-free, discussion anymore. So I've got to think that is, a real challenge when you're going into companies or working with leaders, because bias, it's almost hard to identify what bias means anymore, or if it's actually biased, or if you just don't get it.
Yeah, everything has, there's no such thing as like a neutral news source, right? Everything they did a study. I remember I used to teach a social psychology class, and they did a study, maybe in the 1990s, on news reporters in the US and, their mention of particular political candidates, and how the more they mentioned certain political candidates, how that increased the likelihood of those candidates winning their campaigns. And so how powerful the propaganda and how powerful the media is. And I think that even when you are watching something that seems neutral, every journalist or every media personality is inserting their opinion into the news that they're reporting. And so I don't think anything is really neutral. And I think that that's what makes it difficult, because there's so much noise. It's like you can't even believe your eyes anymore with the rise of AI. And I don't know if you've seen how realistic these deep fakes are, but look at something now and it's like, well, it used to be if there's a video, then we know it's real. But now it's like Sora and all of these other tools are so realistic that it's like video and picture. You don't even know. It's like, I don't even know if this is real or not. I've been fooled. As somebody who's a technology, I don't know if I'm an evangelist, but I'm a technology advocate. I've seen things and I immediately shared it, and then I had to go back and delete because I'm like, wait, that's not real. So, it's getting harder and harder to understand what the truth is. And that goes back to what you said about writing, right? I think that for me, writing is a very powerful way to just document what is happening. I think we're at the point where I can still tell when something is ChatGPT written. You know, when I read Substack posts, I'm like, this seems a little bit like ChatGPT. There's too much alliteration, or there's too much of this.
Right.
That it's hard, you know, but I still do think that there are mediums to get information out, but it's becoming, everything is so, it's oversaturated.
It's oversaturated and people just don't seem to understand how easy it is to search what you've written to figure out whether it's real or not real. So, this has gone really quickly today. I'm speaking with Dr. Janice Gassam Asare. You are a senior contributing writer for Forbes, host of the Dirty Diversity podcast, and author of several books on equity and workplace justice. Your latest one, show it to us again, Rise and Resist. It's coming out.
It's February 24th.
February 24th. So, Janice, what do you want to leave us with today? Like, you know, as a leader of an organization, what do I need to know to stay grounded and effective in pretty unique times?
I would say that there's something for each of us to do to create change and to resist, right? I think that you don't need to be this revolutionary figure to create change or to influence change within your community or in your workplace. And there are very macro ways we can resist, but there are very micro ways. And even something as simple as having a conversation with somebody to help shift their perspective about something is a form of resistance. And so I do think that we should not feel defeated in this moment where it feels like there's a lot going on around the world. We should remember that there are many people who came before us who endured worse circumstances, and we should look at their stories for inspiration, especially in moments like this.
Janice, thank you so much for joining us again on Say Hi to the Future, and best of luck with Rise and Resist, your new book.
Thank you so much, Ken. It was great to be here.
If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support our show, leave us a review and join our mailing list by visiting www.spider.works. That's SPYDER.works, and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for listening, and see you all next Friday.